So today we're making Siberian Pelmeni. It's a meat dumpling, and I'll show you how to make them from scratch. So for the dough, I have 3 cups of white all-purpose flour. To that I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of water, and 1 egg. And I'm going to mix it together and knead it a little bit, and then I'll show you the next step. So I just want to show you that, this is my problem always with giving you guys recipes, because the recipe calls for 3 cups of flour and 1 cup of water, but as you can see, it's very sticky and wet still, so I'm going to have to add more flour to this, and I'll show you what it should look like in the end. So I feel like it's always the same thing with dough, but I guess it really is. You just want to keep adding flour slowly until it stops sticking to your hands. You want it to be pliable. You don't want it to get too dry and stiff. You can totally cheat on this step, and in Asian markets they sell the little dumpling wrappers. I buy the round ones. I've done it before, because you don't always have time to be making dough and rolling it out and all that. They come pre-cut in circles, a whole stack of them, and they're great to use. They're thin, they're lovely, but this homemade dough I find that it's more tender, and it's worth the extra effort if you have the time. So it's ready. I'm just going to let it sit for half an hour, and while it sits I'm going to make the filling. Oh, and I'm going to cover it with some plastic wrap. Okay, so here I have some ground pork, and for the amount of dough that I made, you probably need about 1.25 pounds of meat. I have a little more, but I'm going to be making more dough. I'm going to be making a lot of pelmeni tonight. They're wonderful to freeze, and they cook up in like 2 minutes, so it's a great thing to have in the freezer for when you don't know what to make for dinner. So I have 2 pounds of pork here, but you would probably have 1.25 pounds, and to my 2 pounds I'm going to add, I had 6 onions. I'll show you the size in a minute. I guess regular size onions, like about that big. If you were using larger onions, you could probably use 2 or 3. It's really, you don't have to be exact, to taste. And I have some crushed ice. You probably use about 1/4 cup. And I'm going to add salt and a lot of black pepper. Now for the filling, you can use any kind of meat you want. You can use a combination of pork and veal. You can use pork, veal, and beef. You can do just beef. You can do chicken. If I did chicken, I would probably add a little fresh dill, and if I did beef, I'd probably add a little cilantro. You could add parsley, but for the pork, I'm just going to leave it with the onions and nothing else. Salt and lots of black pepper, and I'm going to mix that together, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so it ended up being a little bit too much onion, so I just added more meat since I'm making more of them. So if you're making about 1.25 pounds, you might want to go with 2 regular-sized onions. I took half of my dough here, and I put it on a floured surface, and I'm going to roll it out very thin, probably, I don't know, less than 1/4 inch. I'll show you when it's ready. Okay, so I rolled out the dough, and I don't know how thick this is, but it's about as thin as you can get it so that it won't rip when you fill it with the meat. And I used a wine glass to cut out the circle. You can use any glass or cookie cutter that you want. You can make it any size that you want. Mine's probably 2 inches across, maybe a little bit more. And I'm going to fill it with the meat, and I'll show you how in a minute. So I cut out all these circles, and then the scraps of dough that I had, I put here, and I'm going to reuse them. I'm going to roll out again, but now I'm going to fill this. So I put about 1 teaspoon of the meat in. You want to make it as full as you can, but still leave yourself some room so you can pinch the edges shut. And now you want to make sure that you get a very tight seal here. You just squeeze it with your fingers. And I'm sorry about that sound. That's my dog roaming around the house and my daughter laughing. So you pinch it shut, and then you just do this with the end. And I'm just going to keep doing that. And if you were to freeze them, you would lay them out flat on a cookie sheet or a cutting board and freeze them like this first, and then you could put them in a big Ziploc bag and cook them as needed. Okay, so to cook your pelmeni, you want to boil quite a bit of water in a large pot, depending on how many of the pelmeni you're going to cook, but you want to give them room to float around, sorry, so they don't stick together. And I have some bay leaves in here. It's, up to you to taste. I think I have like 7 small ones in there. If they were the larger kind, you'd probably put in 3. And then I have a good 1.5 tablespoons of whole black peppercorns. Again, you can add less, but the bay leaves and the peppercorns are essential. You have to have them in your cooking liquid. Now, another way to do this, of course, is to have chicken stock, and you would cook them in the chicken stock, and you can serve them in a chicken stock like a soup with dumplings. Or you could put some chicken stock in this mixture that I have here. I'm going to throw them in, and I'm going to cook them for about 8 minutes. You want them to float to the surface. I should mention that you want to get a good rolling boil on the water before you throw in the pelmeni, and you don't want to overcrowd them so they don't stick together. Okay, so it's been 8 minutes and they're floating and they're not stuck to the bottom. Sometimes if you see that they're sticking to the bottom, you can just give them a little nudge. And I'm just going to use my slotted spoon to take them out, and I'm going to put them in a bowl, and then I'll show you how I serve them. I just want to mention that my first batch made about 60 of these. That's if you're cutting them at about 2 inches and filling them with about a teaspoon of the meat. And I'm on to my second batch now. Okay, so for serving pelmeni, there are many options. You could just butter them, maybe some black pepper. Some people like to eat them with vinegar, any type of vinegar that you like, as much as you like. That used to be my favorite way, actually. I used to drown them in vinegar. But then my husband introduced me to this, lemon juice and sour cream. It might sound weird. You might think it's going to curdle and whatnot, but if you're interested, give it a try. It's really good. It's how we like to eat it. So I just have a good half a lemon there and a nice giant dollop of sour cream. And there it is. I hope you enjoy.